Hi, this is Kelly Fry here in the Oklahoman studio, and we have guests here today. They have come in to celebrate OETA's 60th anniversary. So you all are in from PBS at the national level, and I have here to my left Mark Samuels, and this is Barrick Goodman. See, I almost messed up the Goodman part. Barrick, I was so focused on Barrick that I almost messed up the Goodman part. And then we have John Maggio. So thank you all for being in town. We love it that you dropped by our studio this afternoon. Happy birthday to OETA, or happy anniversary.
Anniversary, 60th, yes.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Pretty impressive. Cool. Very cool.
So, and there's a big shindig tonight to celebrate that, and I believe you are going to be introducing these two because they've been working on a very special project about the Oklahoma City bombing. Yeah. So I'm going to let you guys kind of tell us a little bit about that. Do you want to kind of set us up?
Sure. You know, I run the history series on PBS, American Experience. This is our 28th year on the air. We're the longest running history series on television, most watched. And it was about a year and a half ago, I think it was, that Barrick and I first talked about the idea of doing something about the bombing, but really not so much about just what happened that day and what happened in the aftermath, but really to answer the question, how could this have happened? Why did this happen? And to go back and explore the roots of it. And so we had conversations at the beginning about that, and you know, that's in a way the most challenging part of the film, is to figure out where to begin it, and if we sort of know where the end is here in April 1995. But you should say what happened
Well,
next.
exactly. I mean, we, you know, this strain of anti-government, very virulent anti-government feeling is very old in American history. And Tim McVeigh was not a sort of lone actor come down from, you know, another planet. He was part of a milieu, of a set of ideas. And so, as Mark said, the question was for us sort of when to pick up the thread of that story. And we decided to really focus it around two main events: the Ruby Ridge standoff in Idaho in 1992 and the subsequent Waco standoff in 1993, which, as many people know, were the two really inciting events for, you know,
Influence
Timothy McVeigh.
on him.
Yes. So that's kind of the way the film unfurls, is that it covers these two stories and sort of then finds Timothy McVeigh and sort of examines his radicalization and his twisted imagination, you know, sort of how he came to believe that this was the answer to everything.
And also even sets those events in context, because they're part of a groundswell of reaction. The militia movement, the patriot movement that came to be known as, that grew out of the 1980s. And as Barrick said, you know, that's an undercurrent of American history that's been there, baked in really from the very beginning. You know, we had rebellions, you know, shortly after 1776. And what causes those things to sort of erupt at a certain time, and what caused this that led one event to chain link to another event that led to the bombing here in Oklahoma City.
Did you find that that undercurrent ebbs and flows?
Yes.
I mean,
It does.
Really,
Yes.
kind of comes to a crescendo, and
Exactly. I think a lot of it has to do with insecurity. Whatever the population you're looking at, if they in particular feel their way of life being undermined, people say it's happening now, but it certainly was happening back then. You get these sort of outbursts and these sort of channeling of that anger. And for complex reasons, the federal government ends up often being the target of that emotion. And that's certainly applied in the case of what happened here.
Yeah, I would say, just to add on that the specific causes of an eruption change over time. But I would say one of the commonalities is where it's directed. You know, there's a very deeply ingrained dual relationship that many people have had over the last 3 centuries with our government. We sort of entered our democracy and our new country with suspicion. You know, we didn't know if we wanted the 13 colonies to even unite. Massachusetts wanted to form its own country, for instance. And, you know, that's a long time ago, and it seems very far away, but it's been sort of there all along. So you can tap into that at any given moment for any specific reason.
And you toured the Oklahoma City bombing memorial for the first time.
I did. I have to say, I'm partners with Barrick creatively, but not on this particular film.
Oh, okay.
But I've worked with Mark for a decade.
Okay.
And so I've come along to talk about a different film that I made. Mark sent me to the Brazilian Amazon for a year
Oh,
to
really?
chart the path of Teddy Roosevelt's 1912 expedition there.
So you got to
When was
spend
killed.
a year there.
Yeah, well, it felt like a year. It's not the whole year. I spent
whole
in the
year?
actual jungle about 12 days, but it was enough.
It
felt
seemed like a year?
It seemed like a year, for sure. But no, I have to say the museum was unbelievably moving, very powerful, so tastefully done. Even though they were talking about death and terrorism and these things, it didn't feel exploitative and draws you right in. So
Right.
I was really blown away. I'm glad I got a chance to see it. I've been hearing Barrick talk about the project for a while. So.
And one of the things that was very important to us in making this film was to really honor the people of Oklahoma City, and not only the people who were in the building, who went into the building after the explosion to do their part, to help out after, but just in general, the whole city, because we knew going in that this was an extremely sensitive story, that people who lived through this feel an ownership of it. We lived through, in our neighborhood, we lived through 9/11, we know what that's like.
Right.
So it was a challenge, and the way the film is structured is it keeps returning to that day and that building, and we keep sort of weaving back and forth, back in time and then forward in time,
Right.
to be with those people in that building as they struggled to survive, to get people out, to help. So we really wanted to honor that experience as much as we could in the film.
I have to say I was struck by that in the museum. I mean, given the divisive nature of our political discourse right now,
Right.
I remember going to the museum, remember that feeling of living downtown in New York during 9/11 and then sanctioning off those neighborhoods, but it was the first time I talked to my neighbors ever through that process.
Wow.
So it's really very revealing in that regard, so hopefully that.
Well, it can be divisive, but it seems like in a time of crisis, in a time like that,
Absolutely.
we're all Americans.
Exactly.
You know, and in the case of Oklahoma City bombing, we were all Oklahomans that day.
Right.
And everyone played a role. In
One of
some
the
form or
things-
fashion, everyone
Yeah.
played a role.
I knew where I can still remember where I was when I heard the news of the Oklahoma City bombing. I was
Right.
happened to be covering a story in Arizona, and in my hotel room, I was blown away. So
I
it's
think the irony
experience.
is that Timothy McVeigh wanted to divide people. He wanted to turn people against the government. He wanted to
Right.
create a revolution in this country. And what he ended up doing was uniting people and reminding people that the government is just people. It's just regular, ordinary people doing their jobs every day. The people in the Murrah building were mothers and fathers and uncles and aunts and grandparents, and that's all they were. And that's the way our film ends, with that message, because, you know, McVeigh was so deluded about what others thought and what others would do in the wake of his action. And it was exactly the opposite of what he planned.
And those other incidents just fed into that. I mean, Ruby Ridge and
Yeah.
Waco just fed into that mindset.
Yes, and I think what's interesting about those events is that the federal government, in some ways, played into the hands of the people who
Very much so.
who most detested them by overreacting, by
Okay.
making mistakes. So they weren't blameless in this whole thing. I
Right.
think.
So do you think he thought there'd be some kind of similar reaction to the Oklahoma City bombing, like just kind of incite people to be more angry instead of the opposite?
Yes, that was his stated goal. He
Yeah.
believed that this was the first domino in a sort of
Wow.
chain that would bring people out to, and he was encouraged in that belief by the people that he was in communication with, by this movement, by the militia movement and others. They all felt this way. Only he stepped forward to actually take an action, but the point of our film is that McVeigh wasn't different than a lot of other people who had these similar beliefs. He was different in that he acted on those beliefs, but he was part of a milieu, and
Right.
and they all felt that the federal government needed to be destroyed, and you know, it's alarming when you go back and look at that.
That's what I was about to say. I bet it was kind of scary to know that those undercurrents are still with us.
Exactly. And one of the other interesting parts of the making of the film is that, you know, April 19th has a meaning because of Waco, and actually because of the Battle of Lexington and Concord, going way back. It's the same day. But for Timothy McVeigh, April 19th was the Waco culmination day, and that was the day he chose to do this. The story begins with Ruby Ridge, and Barrick's initial cut of the Ruby Ridge portion of it was so rich, so interesting, that we decided actually to spin it off into its own film, which is going to be on this winter on
Wow.
American Experience on PBS,
Really?
called Ruby Ridge. There's a little piece of it still left. It's not the same thing used twice, but it's the little piece left in Oklahoma City, which is the title of Barrett's film. And that, I think, is a story unto itself, quite a bit different in a way, but contains some of the same themes about how events can spiral out of control. How, as Sarah Weaver says, any situation that has such a high and pitched level of fear can bring out the worst in both sides. And it's a really
Exactly.
powerful statement from her.
Exactly, yeah.
It's interesting. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming to Oklahoma City today
Thank you.
and stopping by our studio.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, and
Pleasure.
good luck. I really look forward to seeing the film.
Thank you.
Thank you.